My name's Jake, and I'm 38. My wife, Melanie, is 35. We've been married for 10 years, and up until recently, I thought we had a solid marriage. Sure, we had our ups and downs like any couple, but we always worked through them, or so I thought. Melanie is, well, let's just say she's a firecracker. Outspoken, confident, and fiercely independent. She's the kind of woman who lights up a room, but she's also the kind of woman who has to have things her way. I always admired her strength, even if it sometimes meant biting my tongue to keep the peace. For years, I worked my ass off to build a comfortable life for us. I'm a contractor, and I run my own small business. Melanie works in real estate, which she's great at, partly because of her charm and partly because she has no problem telling people exactly what they want to hear. I guess that skill set worked on me, too. Looking back, the cracks started showing about a year ago. Melanie started working late more often, which wasn't unusual in her line of work, but it became excessive. She'd claim she was meeting clients or attending networking events, but sometimes her excuses didn't add up. Like the time she came home from a late showing smelling like cologne that definitely wasn't mine. When I asked about it, she laughed it off, saying, "Oh, Jake, you're being ridiculous. It's probably just my new client's scent. Don't be so paranoid." I wanted to believe her. Hell, I did believe her because the alternative was too painful to consider. But deep down, a tiny seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing fast. That seed of doubt turned into an obsession. I couldn't ignore the little things anymore. Like how Melanie suddenly started guarding her phone like it was the nuclear codes. She used to leave it lying around, but now it was always face down, locked with a new passcode I didn't know. And the way she acted when I asked about her late nights? Defensive, dismissive, sometimes downright bitchy. "Why are you always questioning me?" she'd snap. "Do you not trust me? Because if you don't, maybe that's the real problem." It was textbook gaslighting, but at the time I didn't realize it. I thought maybe I was the one overreacting. That is, until the night I found the receipt. It was a Friday. Melanie had gone out again, claiming she had to wine and dine some big-shot client. I stayed home, cracked open a beer, and tried to distract myself with Netflix. But halfway through my show, I noticed her work bag sitting by the door. That bag was like her second skin. She never went anywhere without it. Why had she left it behind? Curiosity got the better of me. I knew it was a bad idea, but I also couldn't stop myself. I opened the bag, sifting through contracts, business cards, and the usual clutter. And then I found it. A crumpled receipt from some fancy restaurant downtown. The kind of place where the cheapest appetizer costs as much as my tools for a week. It was dated 2 nights ago, the same night she said she was working late at the office. The kicker? The receipt wasn't for 2 people. It was for 3. I stared at it, my pulse pounding in my ears. 3 glasses of wine, 2 entrees, a shared dessert. My stomach twisted. Who the hell was she out with? That night I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing Melanie laughing over candlelight with someone else. A part of me still wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation, but another part, the part that had been screaming at me for months, knew better. The next morning I decided to dig deeper. While Melanie was in the shower, I grabbed her phone. She hadn't left it lying around in months, but for some reason, she'd gotten careless that day. Of course, it was locked. But luck, or maybe karma, was on my side. I guessed her old passcode, and it worked. I opened her messages, my hands shaking. There it was, a thread with someone named Mark. My blood ran cold as I scrolled through their conversation. "Mark, last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. Melanie. Me too, red heart, can't wait to see you again. Same time next week." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. It wasn't just innocent flirting. The messages got steamier the further I scrolled, with explicit details about what they'd done and plans to meet up again. And then I found the pictures. Selfies of Melanie in lingerie I'd never seen before, smiling coyly into the camera. One of her and Mark, their faces close, his hand on her thigh. Couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. This was it. The proof. Melanie wasn't just lying to me. She was living an entirely separate life, and she thought I was too stupid to notice. But I wasn't stupid. And I wasn't going to let her get away with it. That afternoon, I couldn't hold it in anymore. The rage, the heartbreak, the humiliation. It was all boiling over. I waited until Melanie got home, breezing through the door with a shopping bag in hand, humming some tune like she didn't have a care in the world. The sight of her so carefree made my blood boil. "Hey, babe," she chirped, dropping her bag on the counter. "What's for dinner?"
I'm starving.
I stood in the living room holding her phone in my hand. "How about we start with the truth, Melanie?" Her smile froze, and she looked at me, confused, or at least pretending to be. "What are you talking about?" I held up the phone. "Mark. Who is he?" The color drained from her face. For a second, she just stared at me like a deer caught in headlights. Then, like clockwork, the defensive walls went up. "Why are you going through my phone? That's such an invasion of privacy. Don't turn this on me." I snapped, my voice shaking with anger. "You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around. Do you think I'm stupid? I've seen the texts, the pictures. Hell, I even saw the receipt from your little date night. So, again, who the hell is Mark?" Her jaw clenched, and she crossed her arms. "He's a coworker," she said flatly. "We've been working on a big deal together. That's all." "Cut the crap, Melanie," I shouted, slamming the phone down on the table. "Coworkers don't send each other pictures like this, or text about how they can't wait for next time. Do you even hear yourself?" She sighed dramatically, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Fine. Yes, we've been seeing each other, but it's not what you think." "Oh, really?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because it looks like you've been screwing him behind my back." "It's not just physical," she shot back, her tone defensive. "Mark, he listens to me. He makes me feel appreciated. Something you haven't done in years." The audacity of her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Are you kidding me right now?" I said, incredulous. "I've done everything for you, Melanie. I've worked my ass off to give us a good life, to support your career, to be there for you. And this is how you repay me?" Her eyes narrowed, and she stepped closer, her voice turning icy. "You want to know the truth, Jake? You're boring. All you ever do is work and come home and expect me to play house." I needed more.
Ist daher, stunt?
Any love or respect I still had for her evaporated in that moment. "You needed more?" I repeated, my voice low. "So your solution was to lie, cheat, and humiliate me? To throw away 10 years of marriage for some guy who probably won't even stick around?" Melanie scoffed, brushing past me. "You're so dramatic. Maybe if you'd been paying attention, this wouldn't have happened." Her words were like a slap to the face. For a moment, I couldn't even speak. Then, quietly, I said, "You know what, Melanie? You've made your choice. And now I'm going to make mine." She paused, glancing back at me with a mix of curiosity and disdain. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You'll see," I said, my voice cold. "You'll see exactly what it means." That night, I packed a bag and left the house. But I wasn't running away. No, this was just the beginning. Melanie thought she could walk all over me and get away with it. She had no idea what was coming. As I drove to my buddy Ryan's place that night, my mind was racing. I'd been blindsided by Melanie's betrayal, but now that the shock had worn off, all I could think about was how to make her pay. She wanted more excitement? Fine. I'd give her the thrill ride of her life, one she wouldn't see coming. Ryan welcomed me in without asking too many questions. He was the kind of friend who could read the situation without prying. I dropped my bag in his spare room, cracked open a beer, and finally told him everything. "She cheated on you?" he said, his eyes wide. "Man, that's messed up. What are you gonna do?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I'm not letting her walk away clean. She deserves to feel every ounce of humiliation she's put me through." Ryan leaned back in his chair, a wicked grin spreading across his face. "Well, if you need ideas, you came to the right guy." Over the next few days, I put my plan into motion. Step 1 was gathering evidence. Everything I could use to expose Melanie for who she really was. I printed out the texts, saved the photos, and even got copies of her recent bank statements. Turns out, she'd been using our joint account to fund her little escapades with Mark. Fancy dinners, hotel stays, even gifts. It was like she wasn't even trying to hide it. Step 2 was doing some digging on Mark. With a little help from Ryan and his connections, I found out that Mark wasn't just some coworker. He was married, with 2 kids and a picture-perfect family. The irony of it all made me laugh bitterly. Melanie had risked everything for a guy who was just as deceitful as she was. But the real kicker came when I stumbled across something even juicier. Melanie had been bragging about a major promotion she was in line for at work, a deal that would put her in charge of a new, high-profile project. It was all she'd been talking about for weeks. It didn't take long to figure out that her affair with Mark was tied to this promotion. He was one of the clients involved in the deal, and from the looks of their messages, he'd been pulling strings to push her ahead of the other candidates. It was perfect. Her professional life was as compromised as her personal one. One night, as I sat in Ryan's garage going over my plan, he leaned forward and asked, "You sure about this, man? Once you do this, there's no going back." I took a deep breath, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "She didn't think twice about betraying me," I said firmly. "Why should I hold back?" Ryan nodded, clinking his beer against mine. "All right, let's burn it down." Step 3 was the execution. First, I anonymously emailed the screenshots and bank statements to Melanie's boss, attaching a polite note that read, "I thought you should know how your employee is securing her deals. Might want to reevaluate that promotion." Next, I reached out to Mark's wife. I debated whether to involve her. It wasn't her fault after all, but she deserved to know the truth. I sent her everything. The texts, the photos, even the receipts. Her response was immediate and emotional, a mix of gratitude and devastation. "I had no idea," she wrote. "Thank you for telling me." Finally, I posted the entire story on a community forum Melanie frequented, leaving out names but including just enough details for people to connect the dots. The post went viral within hours, with dozens of comments speculating about who the cheating wife could be. The fallout began almost immediately. Melanie's phone started blowing up with calls and texts from her coworkers, her friends, and even her family. By the time I returned home to grab the rest of my things, she was sitting in the living room, clutching her phone and crying hysterically. "What did you do, Jake?" she demanded when she saw me. "Why are you trying to ruin my life?" "I didn't ruin anything," I said coolly. "You did that all by yourself." When I walked back into the house to grab the last of my things, Melanie looked like a wreck. Her perfect, polished exterior was gone. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and her face was pale and blotchy. She was pacing the living room, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "What the hell did you do, Jake?" she screamed, her voice cracking. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I calmly dropped a box onto the coffee table, ignoring her theatrics. "You're gonna have to be more specific, Melanie. What exactly are you upset about? The emails to your boss? The messages to Mark's wife? Or the fact that everyone now knows the truth about you?" Her face twisted in fury. "You had no right. This was between us. You didn't have to drag everyone else into it." I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, so it's okay for you to humiliate me, to lie and cheat and steal from me, but it's not okay for me to expose you for the fraud you are? Spare me the double standards, Melanie." She lunged toward me, pointing a trembling finger in my face. "You're petty. That's what you are. A vindictive, bitter man who can't handle a little competition." "A little competition?" I repeated, incredulous. "You cheated on me for months. You stole money from me to fund your affair. And you lied every single day. This isn't competition, Melanie. It's betrayal." She flopped onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. "You've ruined me," she muttered. "The promotion's gone. Mark won't even answer my calls. And now everyone at work thinks I'm some desperate whore." "Well," I said, grabbing my box and heading for the door, "if the shoe fits." That was the last conversation Melanie and I had. The fallout from my revenge spread quickly. Her boss had taken the anonymous tip seriously, pulling her from the promotion and reassigning her to a lower priority team. Rumors about her relationship with Mark circulated the office, and within weeks, she'd quit her job, claiming the environment was toxic. Mark's wife didn't waste any time either. From what I heard, she kicked him out and filed for divorce almost immediately. Word spread in their social circles, and Mark's reputation took a nosedive. I couldn't help but feel a dark sense of satisfaction knowing that he was finally facing consequences too. As for Melanie, she tried to paint herself as the victim. She posted vague updates on social media about being betrayed and targeted by a vindictive ex. But it didn't take long for people to piece together the real story. Mutual friends started distancing themselves, and even her family wasn't buying her excuses. One day, Nathan showed me a post she'd made in a private group. It read, "I made a mistake. Okay? But does that really mean I deserve to lose everything?" The comments were a mix of sympathy and brutal honesty, with one person writing, "Mistakes are spilling a drink, Melanie. What you did was a choice, and choices have consequences." Meanwhile, my life was starting to look up. The divorce proceedings were swift, thanks to the mountain of evidence I had. I kept the house, my business, and most of our savings. Melanie walked away with her personal belongings and a fraction of what she'd been aiming for. Once the paperwork was finalized, I threw a small party at Nathan's place to celebrate. It wasn't about gloating, it was about moving on. "Here's to new beginnings," I said, raising my glass, "and to never settling for less than we deserve." After the divorce was finalized, the first thing I felt was relief. Not joy, not triumph. Just a heavy weight lifted off my shoulders. For months, I'd been living in a web of lies, anger, and heartbreak. Now, finally, I was free to start over. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty anymore. Felt peaceful. I spent the first few weeks cleaning out every trace of Melanie. Her photos, her clothes, her ridiculous throw pillows that no one was allowed to actually use. I boxed it all up and either donated it or tossed it in the trash. The final step was changing the locks, a symbolic and practical way to reclaim my space. Nathan, being the loyal friend he is, pushed me to get out of the house more. "You've been stewing in this mess for too long," he said one Friday night. "It's time to start living your life again." So I joined him for trivia nights, barbecues, and even a hiking trip. At first, I felt awkward, like I didn't belong. But slowly, I started enjoying myself. I laughed more, met new people, and remembered what it felt like to just exist without constant tension. One night, while grabbing drinks with Nathan's crew, I met Sarah. She wasn't flashy or overly confident like Melanie had been. She was warm, easygoing, and had this contagious laugh that put everyone at ease. We started talking about everything from movies to our favorite hole-in-the-wall restaurants, and by the end of the night, I couldn't stop smiling. A few days later, I worked up the nerve to text her. "Hey, it's Jake from Trivia Night. Want to grab coffee sometime?" Her reply was instant. "I'd like that." Dating again was strange. I hadn't done it in over a decade, and the idea of opening myself up to someone new was both exciting and terrifying. But Sarah made it easy. She wasn't pushy, and she didn't expect me to have it all figured out. On our third date, over burgers and fries at a diner, I told her about Melanie. She listened without interrupting, her expression thoughtful. "That sounds awful," she said when I finished. "But it also sounds like you've handled it better than most people would." "I don't know about that," I admitted. "There were days I felt like I was falling apart." "That's normal," she said, smiling gently. "The important thing is you didn't let it break you." Just when I thought I'd seen the last of Melanie, she popped back into my life like a bad rerun. It started with a text, short and cryptic. "Hey, can we talk?" I ignored it. A week later, she sent another one. "Jake, please. I miss you." That made me laugh out loud. Miss me? After everything she'd done? It was almost funny. Almost. The next message was longer, dripping with faux remorse. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I realize now how much I took you for granted. I made a mistake, Jake. Please, let's try to fix this." I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the messages to Nathan, who called me immediately, cracking up. "You've got to be kidding me," he said. She's really trying to spin this? Unbelievable. A few days later, Melanie took it up a notch. She showed up at my house, standing on the porch with a box of my favorite donuts like we were in some rom-com. "Jake," she said when I opened the door, her eyes welling with crocodile tears. "I just want to talk." "I don't think we have anything to talk about," I said coldly. "Please," she begged, stepping closer. "I know I screwed up, okay? But we've been through so much together. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" "It meant something," I said, meeting her gaze. "But you threw it all away. Go home, Melanie." She stared at me for a moment, as if she couldn't believe I wasn't falling for her act. Finally, she sighed, dropping the donuts on the porch. "Fine. Be bitter. But don't come crying to me when you realize no one else will ever love you like I did." "Goodbye, Melanie," I said, shutting the door. I thought that slamming the door in Melanie's face would be the end of it. But no, Melanie was like a bad habit. Hard to shake and even harder to ignore. A week later, she sent me an email. This one wasn't begging or remorseful. It was furious. "You've ruined my life, Jake. I hope you're proud of yourself. I've lost my job, my friends, and my reputation because of you. You're vindictive, cruel, and heartless. Congratulations. You won." At first, I was tempted to delete it without a second thought. But then, as I reread it, something caught my attention. She mentioned a new client she was working with before everything fell apart. The way she worded it was odd, like she was blaming me for losing the deal. My gut told me there was more to it. Curiosity got the better of me, so I dug around. With a little sleuthing and some help from Ryan, who was getting way too into this drama, I uncovered something I hadn't expected. That client wasn't just any client, it was Mark. Apparently, before their affair was exposed, Melanie had been quietly negotiating a deal that would have funneled a hefty commission directly into her personal account. No wonder she'd been so desperate to protect him. Couldn't believe it. Not only had she betrayed me emotionally, but she'd also been planning to screw me financially. If the deal had gone through, part of the joint assets she'd skimmed from would have made her a tidy profit during the divorce. But thanks to my revenge exposing their affair, the deal had collapsed. Karma really does work fast. Armed with this new information, I decided to make one final play. I reached out to the company that had been involved in the deal and provided them with copies of Melanie and Mark's incriminating messages. It wasn't hard to frame it as a conflict of interest, and potentially an ethics violation. The fallout was swift. Mark lost his position with the company, and any chance of salvaging his career went up in flames. As for Melanie, word got around in her professional circle, making her untouchable. Nobody wanted to work with someone who had a reputation for mixing business with pleasure and tanking deals. The best part? I didn't have to lift another finger. The consequences of their actions rippled out all on their own. With Melanie finally out of the picture, I focused on rebuilding my life. Sarah and I continued to see each other, and things were starting to feel normal again. She was different from Melanie in every way. Honest, down-to-earth, and refreshingly drama-free. One evening, as we sat on my back porch watching the sunset, Sarah asked me, "Do you ever regret what happened?" With Melanie, I thought about it for a moment. "I don't regret standing up for myself," I said. "I regret trusting someone who didn't deserve it. But honestly, I think I needed this. It forced me to wake up, to see things for what they really were." Sarah nodded, a small smile on her lips. "It's hard to start over, but you're doing it." "Yeah," I said, smiling back. "And this time, I'm doing it right." Advice to Reddit. If you're reading this and you're dealing with betrayal, here's what I've learned. Trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't lose yourself trying to fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed. You deserve respect, honesty, and loyalty. Revenge can feel good in the moment, but healing feels even better. Thank you for staying with me. This crazy journey is finally over, and I'm ready for what's next. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more interesting stories. And leave a comment with what you would do in this situation. See you in the next videos.